What if I told you that the most important conversation about the future of crypto didn't happen in Washington, D.C.? It didn't happen on CNBC, and it wasn't some leaked memo from a hedge fund. It happened in a room full of Ripple's top minds, and what they decided in that room is quietly reshaping how trillions of dollars are going to move around this planet. Today, we're breaking down something that most people glossed over, and by the end of this video, I think you're going to look at Ripple and honestly the entire digital asset space very differently. Let's get into it. Here's a question I want you to sit with for a second. When a massive political shift happens, when the regulatory winds suddenly change direction, what does a smart company do? Do they sprint full speed ahead? Do they wait and watch? Or do they play chess while everyone else is playing checkers? Because that's exactly the strategic crossroads Ripple found itself at when the political climate in the United States flipped in crypto's favor. And here's what's fascinating: it wasn't obvious. Even inside Ripple's own boardroom, there wasn't a unanimous, clean answer. Think about that. One of the most sophisticated blockchain companies in the world, with lawyers, economists, strategists, and technologists in the room, and they were genuinely torn. One faction said, "Hit the gas now, capture everything while the window is open." The other said, "Slow down, because a window that opens can also shut, and if we overextend ourselves, we might not survive the next regulatory winter." That tension. That's not a weakness. That's actually what good leadership looks like, and the path they ultimately chose tells you everything about where they think this industry is going. Let me give you an analogy that I think captures this perfectly. Imagine you're a farmer. It's been drought season for years, your fields are cracked, your competitors have gone under, and then one morning you wake up and the sky is dark with rain clouds. Do you immediately plant every single seed you own? Every last one? Or do you think carefully, because what happens if the rain only lasts 3 weeks? Ripple's answer was nuanced. Yes, plant aggressively, but don't plant so deep that you can't pivot if the weather turns. The IPO conversation is the perfect example here. Going public is not just a fundraising move, it's a permanent change in how a company operates. You answer to shareholders, to quarterly earnings calls, to analysts who know nothing about blockchain but everything about spreadsheets. And if the regulatory environment turns hostile a year after you IPO? You're now fighting that war as a public company with stock price pressure breathing down your neck. Staying private right now is strategic discipline, not hesitation. That's a move that gets made by people who are thinking in decades, not quarters. And I think that's actually the most underreported part of this whole story. Everyone's focused on what Ripple is doing, the acquisitions, the integrations, the push for lust. But the smarter story is what they chose not to do, that restraint. That's a feature, not a bug. Now let's talk about the Clarity Act, because this is where things get really interesting and honestly a little controversial. You've got people in the crypto space playing hardball with this legislation, threatening to walk away from the bill entirely unless certain conditions are met, and the question is that a real threat? Or is it theater? Here's my read on it, and I think this is actually the key insight most commentators are missing. Negotiation only works when both parties believe the other side will walk. That's not cynicism, that's economics. It's the same reason labor unions go on strike sometimes even when they don't want to. The credibility of the threat is the leverage. So when you see industry figures publicly pushing back hard against parts of the bill, you need to understand. Some of that is genuine disagreement, and some of that is negotiating positioning. The trick is knowing which is which, and honestly, even the people doing it might not always be able to separate the two. But here's what I find more important than the political theater: the substance of what Clarity actually unlocks. Think back to 1996. The Telecommunications Act. Before that law, you had a fragmented, confusing patchwork of rules about who could offer what kind of communication service in which state. After it, the internet boom exploded. Companies could finally build at scale because they knew the rules. Capital flooded in, innovation followed. We are at that exact inflection point right now for digital assets. Not a maybe, not a someday, now. The difference between passing real Clarity legislation and failing to do so isn't just regulatory peace of mind for existing companies, it's the unlocking of institutional capital that has been sitting on the sidelines precisely because fund managers and compliance departments cannot get comfortable with legal uncertainty. We're talking about pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, insurance companies managing tens of trillions in assets. These entities want exposure to this space. Their clients want it, but their legal teams keep saying, "Not yet, the rules aren't clear enough." Clarity changes that sentence. Now here's the part that really hit me, and I want to be honest with you. This genuinely surprised me. There's a philosophical honesty that sometimes comes out from the people who built these systems when they step slightly outside their corporate role. And what tends to emerge is this: the people who built the best blockchain technology don't actually want a monopoly. They don't want to be the only game in town. Because they understand better than anyone that a world with only one crypto network, one stablecoin, one ledger is not the free, open, decentralized future they were building toward. That's not a PR line, that's a worldview rooted in how the internet itself grew. The early internet wasn't dominated by one company, it was messy, competitive, full of failed experiments. AOL, MySpace, Netscape, they all lost eventually. And that competition is why we got Google, Amazon, and YouTube. The best technology won because it had to compete. The same logic applies here. If crypto clarity legislation accidentally carves out advantages for existing players and makes it harder for new projects to launch or innovate, even if the intention was to bring order, it may end up strangling the very thing it was trying to protect. Ripple's enterprise-first strategy is smart precisely because it doesn't require retail adoption right now. They're building the rails, the infrastructure, the same way fiber optic cable companies built networks before streaming services existed. Nobody watched Netflix in 1998, but the people laying cable in 1998 made Netflix possible. The question Ripple is implicitly betting on: once those rails exist, once institutional infrastructure is embedded, once banks and financial institutions are running on XRP rails globally, will retail follow? History says yes. Every major financial infrastructure shift has followed the same pattern. Enterprises adopt first, build confidence, smooth out the edges. Then the cost comes down, the UX improves, and ordinary people show up. Let me zoom out for a second because I think we sometimes lose the forest for the trees in this space. We are living through a genuine restructuring of how money moves around the world, not a disruption, a restructuring, and it's happening at multiple layers simultaneously. At the asset layer, tokenization of real-world assets is quietly becoming a multi-trillion-dollar conversation. Real estate, treasuries, private equity, commodities, all of it being brought on-chain, made programmable, made usable as collateral. That's not science fiction. That's happening right now with major institutions already experimenting with it. At the infrastructure layer, cross-border payments using blockchain rails are already proving faster and cheaper than legacy systems, significantly cheaper. The kind of efficiency gains that make CFOs sit up and pay attention. At the regulatory layer, Japan, the EU, Singapore, and now the United States are all moving toward formal frameworks. The question is no longer if regulation comes. It's what kind and how fast. And here's the thing about institutional investor appetite: surveys of hundreds of major investment managers in Asia and Europe are showing enormous and growing interest in staking, lending, and tokenized assets. That's not retail speculation. That's smart money with long time horizons starting to price this in. So here's where I land after thinking through all of this. Ripple is playing a longer game than the price chart shows. The IPO decision, the legislative positioning, the enterprise-first approach, none of these are random moves. They're the moves of an organization that genuinely believes the infrastructure they've built will matter in 10 years, not just in the next bull run. The clarity legislation, imperfect as it may be, is a door. You don't get the perfect door on the first try. You get a door, and then over time you improve the hinges, widen the frame, replace the wood with steel. What you cannot afford is to have no door at all, because then the rain comes in and everything you built gets damaged. Whether you hold XRP, whether you're a Ripple believer or a skeptic, I think there are lessons here that apply to every corner of this industry. Know what you're building for. Know when to push and when to hold. Know when the window is open and build fast enough to matter, but not so recklessly that one storm takes you out. The smartest people in this space are thinking about decades. Are you? Drop your thoughts below. Do you think crypto clarity legislation will be the telecom act of our generation, or are we overhyping the moment? Like the video if you found value in it, subscribe if you want more deep dives like this, and I'll see you in the next one.